The moment the Browns' quarterback room erupted, the entire franchise felt the shockwave. What happened inside those walls wasn't just another heated argument or some harmless trash talk between two rookies trying to climb the depth chart. It was the moment everyone inside the organization feared would eventually come, a clash of pride, ego, and ambition that has been brewing since draft night. And now that it's reached the surface, there's no putting it back. From the outside, it looked like Cleveland finally had a plan. Two young quarterbacks, both with talent, both with upside, both capable of becoming the face of the franchise if things went right. But behind the scenes, it wasn't confidence that was building. It was pressure. Every throw, every rep, every snap was silently fueling something darker. Teammates felt it, coaches noticed it, and the veterans in that locker room couldn't ignore it anymore. Because this isn't just about who starts on Sunday. It's not even just about winning football games. This is about control. It's about who commands the locker room, who the team rallies behind, and who the organization ultimately trusts to lead them into the future. And when that tension reached its breaking point, it wasn't loud, it wasn't chaotic. It was something more intense, more personal, more revealing. What happened in that room didn't end with a handshake or an apology. It ended with faces red, tempers flaring, and players walking out wondering if this team was about to flip upside down. Nobody on the outside was supposed to know about it. Nobody was supposed to talk, but the story leaked anyway, and once it did, fans, media, and analysts began asking the same question: what's really going on in Cleveland? Because this wasn't just a disagreement, it was the spark to a fire that might change the future of the Browns. And if you think this is just a one-off moment, think again. This was only the beginning. When Cleveland drafted not one, but two rookie quarterbacks in the same class, people on the outside called it bold. Inside the building, everyone knew it was a gamble that could either change everything for the better or split the franchise in half. Dillon Gabriel arrived first, the higher draft pick the player scouts described as polished, reliable, and NFL ready. He was the safe investment, the steady hand, the quarterback expected to grow into the job with patience and discipline. Then came the second pick, the one that shifted the energy the moment his name was called. Shedeur Sanders walked into Cleveland with something no scouting report could measure. He came with hype, legacy, pressure, and a spotlight that never shuts off. His draft slide surprised everyone, and it gave him a chip on his shoulder the size of the stadium he'd be playing in. No franchise adds a name like that without knowing the entire dynamic of the team is about to change. From the very first offseason workout, there was a silent question hanging over the quarterback room. Not who was more talented, not who worked harder, but who would be given the keys when the moment was right. Gabriel represented what organizations love: structure, experience, and a path that makes sense on paper. Sanders represented something more unpredictable: potential mixed with swagger, patience mixed with pressure. The kind of player who doesn't just want a shot, he expects one. Every throw in training camp felt like a comparison. Every decision in practice was another evaluation. Coaches kept saying it was an open competition, but even the players could feel it wasn't going to stay friendly forever. When you put two ambitious quarterbacks in the same locker room, you don't just get competition. You get a countdown, a slow build toward the day when only one of them can be the face of the franchise and the other becomes an afterthought. And once that countdown started ticking, everyone understood one thing. This wasn't just a standard quarterback battle. It was the beginning of a rivalry that was never going to stay quiet. Everything changed the moment Dillon Gabriel went down. One hit against Baltimore, one medical decision to pull him from the game, and suddenly the competition wasn't theoretical anymore. Gabriel had been the starter because he earned it in camp. Coaches trusted him, players respected him, and the team believed he understood the system well enough to keep them afloat. But NFL careers don't wait for perfect timing. They turn on a single moment, and that was Gabriel's. Shedeur Sanders stepped onto the field in the second half, and it wasn't the storybook debut anyone expected. He struggled. The offense stalled, the timing was off, and the numbers were ugly. Analysts questioned whether he was ready. Fans wondered if the Browns had rushed him. And even inside the organization, there were whispers that this was too much, too soon. Gabriel's injury had opened the door, but Sanders hadn't grabbed it yet. Still, the opportunity was there. The biggest pressure in football isn't a playoff run or a game-winning drive. It's the fear of losing your job to the backup. Gabriel knew it, the coaching staff knew it, and Sanders knew it most of all, because the moment he walked onto that field, the entire direction of the season shifted. Coaches said the starting job would return to Gabriel once he was healthy. Reporters repeated it, but the reaction inside the locker room wasn't nearly as simple. Some veterans saw Sanders as the future. Others believed Gabriel had earned more time, and according to reports, players began picking sides long before either quarterback realized it. The concussion was the turning point not just for the depth chart, but for the energy inside the building. It didn't matter that Sanders' debut wasn't impressive. What mattered was that he was finally in the picture. He wasn't waiting anymore. He wasn't watching from the sideline. He had a chance. And that chance would only grow in the weeks that followed. Because in the NFL, you don't always win the job with statistics or clean execution. Sometimes you win it by stepping into the spotlight at the exact moment someone else is forced out of it. This was the moment everything opened up for Sanders. The only question was whether he could keep the door from closing again. Las Vegas flipped the entire narrative on its head. 1 week earlier, there were doubts about whether Sanders was ready. 1 week later, he walked onto the field with the kind of confidence that doesn't need permission. He didn't look like the rookie who struggled in his first real action. He looked like a quarterback who refused to let that be his story. The moment the offense took the field, there was a different energy, a sharper edge, the feeling that Sanders came into this game with something to prove.
From the opening drive, it was clear he wasn't just filling in while Gabriel recovered. He wasn't just managing the game, he was attacking it. Sanders made throws that reminded fans why he had been talked about for years as a player with franchise potential. He took risks, pushed the ball, and played like someone who knew this wasn't just another start. This was the audition that could change his career. This was the game that would decide whether he stayed the backup or became the player everyone expected him to be. The reaction from the fan base came instantly. Social media exploded with highlights, breakdowns, and clips replayed over and over. Analysts started asking the question nobody was willing to touch before. Is this the Browns' future under center? Television shows, podcasts, and sports networks didn't wait for the next game. They jumped on the story immediately, debating what it meant for the team, the locker room, and the season. Fans didn't just support Sanders, they rallied behind him. They saw something Gabriel hadn't delivered yet: momentum. Even inside the building, people noticed. Teammates talked about the spark. Coaches talked about the growth. Reporters said the tone shifted that week in practice, as if everyone understood something had changed. It wasn't just one win, it was the feeling that a new direction had arrived. And once the momentum swung towards Sanders, it wasn't going to swing back quietly. Gabriel wasn't losing the starting job because of an injury anymore. He was losing it because Sanders refused to give it back. And once a quarterback earns that kind of moment in the NFL, it becomes almost impossible to take it away. This wasn't just a good performance, it was a turning point. The Browns didn't just have a backup with potential anymore. They had a quarterback who was suddenly making everyone wonder if this was the beginning of something bigger. What happened next wasn't visible on TV or in post-game interviews. It was happening where cameras weren't allowed, inside the locker room. On the surface, both quarterbacks said the right things. They praised each other publicly, supported the coaching staff, and downplayed the competition. But anyone who has played in a professional locker room knows the real conversations don't happen in press conferences. They happen in the meeting rooms, the weight room, and the moments when the coaches walk out. Reports began circulating that players were quietly picking sides. Some teammates saw Sanders as the future, the quarterback with the upside, the spark, and the momentum the team desperately needed. Others reportedly felt Gabriel hadn't gotten a fair chance to settle in before the injury changed everything. There were whispers that veterans respected Gabriel's command of the offense and the way he managed games. And there were rumors that younger players were already buying into the idea that Sanders wasn't just filling in, he was the new leader. None of this was shouted. None of it became a public feud. It was the kind of tension that grows slowly, almost invisibly, until it's too big to ignore. Coaches started making subtle adjustments. Separate conversations, separate preparation, even separate drills during practice, not because of a confrontation, but because the atmosphere was shifting. The quarterback room didn't feel like a shared space anymore. It felt like a line had been drawn in the middle of it. From the outside, it looked like competition, but inside the building, it felt like a divide. Rumors suggested some players believed Gabriel deserved his shot back, while others were convinced Sanders should take over permanently. And with every practice rep, every team meeting, and every snap that Sanders took in games, that divide grew a little wider. The Browns weren't just choosing between two quarterbacks. They were watching a locker room transform into two different viewpoints of the team's future. You could sense something building, an unspoken warning that this wasn't sustainable. Because when players start whispering about who should lead them, when the coaching staff starts making quiet adjustments, and when the locker room starts shifting its loyalties, it's only a matter of time before the situation stops being calm and starts becoming explosive. And that moment was closer than anyone realized. The moment everything finally erupted didn't happen on a field or in front of a camera. It happened in a place where emotions usually stay contained, the quarterback room. According to multiple reports and sources who have spoken about the situation privately, one film session turned into the moment all the quiet tension finally surfaced. It started with a comment about the Raiders game.
Nothing unusual at first, just routine breakdown and analysis among teammates. But then, according to those same reports, the tone shifted. Rumors suggest that Gabriel made a remark about the game that pushed the conversation into personal territory. It wasn't loud, it wasn't a screaming match. Players who have talked about it since described it as the kind of quiet confrontation that hits harder than yelling ever could. Sanders didn't react with theatrics or anger. He reportedly stood up, looked his teammate in the eye, and made it clear that the line had been crossed. One sentence, 5 words, and the room fell silent. From there, the situation escalated quickly. Not physically, not in some movie-style locker room brawl, but in a way that instantly made everyone in the room realize the competition was no longer just professional. Teammates stepped in, not because it was about to get violent, but because the conversation had reached a point where coaches needed to be involved. The details of who said what next are still based on secondhand accounts and private conversations, but every version of the story has the same theme. The tension finally boiled over. The confrontation didn't solve anything. It didn't clear the air. It didn't end with understanding or agreement. Instead, it marked the moment where the rivalry stopped being internal and became something the entire building had to address. Coaches were called in, meetings changed, preparation routines shifted. From that moment on, nobody could pretend this was just a normal competition anymore. It was the moment the storyline stopped being whispers and became unavoidable. And once it happened, there was no turning back. The aftermath of that moment didn't show up on a highlight reel or a press conference podium. It showed up in the subtle decisions that teams only make when things cross a line. According to reports and people familiar with the situation, the Browns coaching staff began adjusting schedules, changing meeting arrangements, and rethinking how the quarterback room operated. It didn't look like a punishment for either player. It looked like a strategy shift, a quiet acknowledgement that the situation had become delicate. Teammates noticed first. The chemistry between the quarterbacks reportedly disappeared. Practice reps were separated. Individual meetings became the norm instead of group preparation. Coaches didn't come out and say it publicly, but the message was clear enough. The organization had to keep things controlled. What was once a competition was now a potential distraction, and the staff wasn't going to let it derail the rest of the season. This is where the stakes became bigger than one comment or one heated moment. The Browns weren't just trying to win games, they were trying to evaluate the future of the franchise. With the team sitting in a difficult record position, every decision became more important. Were they looking at a quarterback of the future in Sanders? Was Gabriel still the steady option who deserved another opportunity? Or were both players simply stepping stones toward the next draft? The tension didn't disappear, it evolved. Coaches faced the challenge of keeping the locker room balanced. Some players reportedly believed Sanders had taken control of the offense.
Others thought Gabriel had earned more time. The fan base wasn't subtle either. Social media, sports radio, and analysts were already debating who should lead the team. Every decision the coaching staff made was being viewed through the lens of that divide. And the most dangerous part for Cleveland wasn't that two quarterbacks wanted the job, it was that both of them had valid reasons to believe they should get it. Gabriel earned his chance through consistency and preparation. He did everything the coaching staff asked, and he handled an impossible situation with professionalism. Sanders stepped into the spotlight when the moment demanded it and changed the energy of the offense. He brought momentum, belief, and the kind of confidence that can reshape the entire trajectory of a franchise. The divide isn't random. It's based on real reasons, real talent, and two different versions of how this team could move forward. That's why the question is so much bigger than who starts the next game. It's about who commands the locker room, who the players follow, who the organization trusts to lead when everything is on the line. And no matter which direction the Browns choose, the fallout from this moment won't fade quickly. It's going to define the rest of the season, the offseason, and possibly the future of the franchise.
Because Cleveland didn't just draft two quarterbacks, they sparked a rivalry that has now reached every corner of the organization. And when the next kickoff happens, one of them will be holding the ball while the other watches from the sideline, waiting for the next opening, the next mistake, or the next chance to take control again. So the real question for the Browns isn't who has the job today, it's who is going to shape the future of this team. The fans already have their opinions. The players already feel the shift. The organization has to decide something much harder than a depth chart. Who runs Cleveland? And with the way this season has unfolded, that answer is anything but obvious.